Good morning, everybody. Thanks for having me today, Keith. I'm just going to, page down. I'm just going to give you a brief outline of our management program for 2013. I'll go through our objectives of our program, our funding, where we currently have Beetle and our management program, what we just have finished completing, and also where we are going to go next with our program. We have two provincial objectives in Alberta. The pictures down there are our published documents, our action plan, our management strategies, and our roles and responsibilities. Our two objectives of the provincial program are to slow the spread north and south along the eastern slopes, and also to slow the spread east farther towards the Saskatchewan border. Our provincial objectives were written in 2006. That's when those three documents were published, and a lot has changed in the years since we have started managing mountain pine beetle in the province, and so these objectives actually need to be rewritten and updated, and I will talk about that a little bit in where we're going. We have three provincial strategies that help us to meet our objectives: the prevention, susceptibility, and reduction. And we have detection, risk analysis, and control, and then a rehabilitation strategy. I'm only going to talk today about the detection, our risk analysis, and control, and I believe the rehabilitation piece will be covered tomorrow. And I think Darren is actually going to talk a little bit about the prevention and susceptibility reduction strategies. I hope you guys can see this. This is just a basic chart of our detection, risk analysis, and control management activities. Our activities will start in May. We actually just finished wrapping up our control as of March 31st. And so our first activity that we will undertake will start May 15th, and we'll do our population assessment surveys, or our R-value surveys. That happens May 15th till about June 15th. We do put out dispersal baits to try and detect to see if we have had any movement of populations or any activity in areas that we haven't seen beetle activity previously. We will do aerial surveys starting August 15th, and we will go through till the middle of September. We do green to red surveys as well. We start those at the end of August and go through till September 15th. We pick up our dispersal baits as well at the end of September, start of October. And then when we have all of the information collected, that's when we go through our decision support system and our risk analysis of all the sites that we collected from the air, and that's when we start to determine our work plan for the year. We start our ground surveys in November, and then we try and start our control sometime in early January, or as early as we can, and go through till the end of fiscal year, March 31st. Now, our beetle year does not run on the fiscal year. Our beetle year actually runs August 15th of the current year to August 14th of the next year. So actually, even though we're 2014, we're still operating in the beetle 2013 year. The province of Alberta is divided up into 5 different regions, and we have forest health officers in each of the regions. And at the regional level, the forest health officers actually implement all the operational programs. So they conduct the aerial surveys, they conduct the green to red surveys, the R values, and they also run all of the survey and control contracts. So most of the FHOs, if not all of them, are actually here today. So if you do have some specific questions for an area that you have an interest in, you can talk to some of the FHOs. Historic funding, you probably can't see this. Alberta invests a lot of money into mountain pine beetle. Since 2005, we've actually had $336 million invested. This graph will be updated in the next week or so to include the $40 million that we spent this year. So we're up almost at $400 million in mountain pine beetle management since 2005. We will be going for another funding ask this year as well. And the ask will probably go in sometime in the next month or so, and then we'll wait to hear from Treasury Board to see what we're given for management this year. This is just a graph of our funding allocations and where most of our money goes, and you can see that a large portion of it goes to our level 1 control, or that's our single tree, infested tree control. The next largest draw on the funds are for the ground surveys and then aerial surveys. We have other activities like seed collection, operational support, research, our endangered species recovery program, population surveys, communications, and detection baiting, but by far the number one draw on the resource is our control program. On to the current detections. We use our annual aerial surveys and also the dispersal baits to find where the beetles are and where they are active in the current year. We have active beetle populations in all the regions of Alberta except for the Red Deer region, and we have found beetles at bait sites as far east as Lac La Biche and at the Northwest Territories border. This is a map of our annual aerial survey results, and it actually, same as Tim, it actually looks worse than it actually is because of the size of the dots just form a mass of red. Our aerial surveys do not actually cover the entire part of the province. We only fly our mountain pine beetle aerial surveys in areas where we know we will be doing active survey and control. So this graph here is actually our flight lines. So you can see that we really concentrate our surveys here, up through here, and then some in here. And you can see some of the flight lines are fairly wide. That's just overview surveys to see if we can start picking up any red trees. But when we start to get into the areas where we're actually operating survey and control, we take very detailed single point infestation points. Dispersal baits. We put dispersal baits up in areas where we haven't seen activity, just to see if we can find beetle activity. We'll expand our aerial surveys if we need to, and put some resources down on the ground to see what we can see. And anything here you can see with the yellow triangles, we did not pick up any beetle activity, but where we have the red triangles is where we did pick up some beetle activity. Last year we had a bit more activity detected at the bait sites farther east. This year we didn't pick up as much. So these circles here just indicate last year where bait sites were hit. This map here gives us an overall picture of what has happened in Alberta so far. The green is our pine component, and the red is where we have had mountain pine beetle active in the past. So wherever there is red on that map is where we have treated or had active beetle occurring since 2006. So this really is a cumulative presence map of Alberta. So you can see how we have a bunch of activity in some of these areas that we don't aerial survey, and that's because we do not take any survey and control actions or ground survey and control actions in those areas. The stats on that: 1.54 million hectares have sustained some sort of mountain pine beetle damage since 2006, and that represents about 26% of the forest that actually is at risk. So on to our actual program. Survey and control planning, we go through various steps and used data at different times through the year to come up with our program. To determine our ground survey, where we actually are going to survey on the ground, we use our decision support system to determine how many of the aerial survey sites that we detected need to be ground surveyed. We then take our green to red ratios and our aerial survey results and determine a potential number of green trees on the ground that we have to control. And then we use that information along with our budget that we've been allocated to designate management zones throughout the province. This year, unfortunately, we had a wrench thrown at us. We actually had more than one. We had a few wrenches thrown at us in terms of operational planning, but we'll just go through this and I'll show you where we had some wrenches put in. So our ground surveys, like I said, we use our decision support system to prioritize sites that we need to ground survey, and it pretty much gives a risk analysis of that individual site. How easy is it for that site to produce beetles that will spread and infest another site? The number of survey sites that we determined through our DSS increased a lot this year, so we had to go to more than 17,000 sites on the ground this year for survey, which you can see in 2010, it actually is higher than 2010. And 2010 was the year after the 2009 in-flight. 2011 and 2012, you can see we increased just slightly. But in 2013, we had a huge jump, which was our first wrench. Trees to control. While we're doing aerial surveys, we take a bunch of green to red surveys, and from that, we take the number of sites that we're going to ground survey, we use our green to red data, estimate our potential number of green trees that we have to control on the ground. This is a map of our green to red surveys for this year. Anywhere that you see a little black triangle is where we took green to red surveys this year. We took over 600 green to red surveys this year, which is over double what we have taken in the past. And we've been monitoring the green to red ratios every year since, again, 2006, so we can start to see sort of some trends or generalize what may be happening. And you can see here we've got the 2011, 2012, and 2013 green to red maps. And what we can see on here is that our green to reds didn't really show that we had a lot of higher green to red ratios. Anywhere the color is warmer is where we have higher green to red ratios. So you can see in 2011 we had quite a few areas of high green to red ratios. 2012 it was a little bit less. And then in 2013 you can see the map is mostly green, so that gave us an indication that the beetles weren't spreading, or we didn't have a lot of production under these green to red trees, or so we thought. This is a map of our spring 2013 R values, and this is what we'll be starting to collect in May of 2014, fairly shortly. This map actually indicates exactly opposite of what the green to red map shows. This map, our Overwintering Survival Map, shows that the beetles actually did fairly well over winter. Again, where you see the red and the orange indicates that the beetles did well. This is a map of the 2011, 2012, and 2013 maps. And you can actually see that, especially compared to 2012, the 2013 map showed that the beetles overwintered better. However, we use our green to red data because it's actual on the ground data, and it gives us an idea of the populations to determine our potential number of green trees that we have to control. R value does not link to population, so we really can't give an estimate of, if we have high R values, what our population rates will be. So it turns out that our green to red, or actually our R value survey map, is more accurate than actually what happened on the ground with the green to reds. Our green to reds were quite out this year in several areas, so when we actually got down on the ground, we found that we had a lot more green attack trees that needed to be controlled at each site than we had previously anticipated. Zones. So we set up our zones in October, and we use the number of trees that we need to control, the number of sites we need to go to, and our budget, because we have an idea of how much each of these activities cost, and we set our zones. The leading edge zone is our highest priority zone. It is also our largest zone in the province. It is our highest treatment priority. We treat sites that have 3 or more green attack trees at each site. The active holding zone is our second priority. It really is a buffer between your leading edge and your inactive holding zone. In the active holding zone, we treat sites that have 10 or more green attack trees at each site. And then in the inactive holding zone, we actually don't do any active management for beetle populations. It's managed for other values. This is our map for our zones that we used when organizing our control contracts. The red is our leading edge. We don't have beetles throughout the entire leading edge zone, but in areas like through there, if we were to detect active beetle populations, then we would treat them as leading edge. You can see the yellow there is our active holding zone, and it is quite a small sliver. And then in the green you can see where we have the inactive zone, where we don't do any active management. Partway through the year, when we put our aerial survey contracts and we collect all of our aerial survey data, then we set our zones, and then we go down and do ground surveys. So as our ground surveys are going on, we're getting information back on how many trees that we actually have to treat. Once we get partway through our ground survey contracts, we tender our control contracts so that we can get control work started on the ground. And each year we put our control contracts out to bid, and we estimate how many trees we have to control, and also how much money it will cost to control each tree. So in the past few years, you can see our control contract numbers for trees has changed a lot. In 2010, it was about $89 a tree. 2011, $120 a tree. 2012, $113 a tree. And then in 2013, we had a really large increase in the cost to control each individual tree. It went up to $167, almost $168 per tree. So when you're anticipating controlling over 100,000 trees and you have an increase in that dollar figure for your trees to control that obviously had a very large impact on our program, and it required us to do less trees, control less trees than we had originally anticipated, and also adjust our zone map. So that was our third wrench. So because of the budget constraints that we had and the number of trees to control, we did have to change the zones somewhat. Some areas that were included in the active holding zone were unfortunately switched to inactive holding zone. So we had to sit down and prioritize where our priorities did lay for the control of the trees. We had to drop a bunch of sites that had been surveyed, drop those from control. And out of the $40 million that we were allocated for mountain pine beetle management in the province, we had initially earmarked $10 million to go into the rehabilitation program, but we actually only ended up allocating $5 million to the rehab program and using the other $5 million for our operational survey and control program. And because of the number of trees that had to be dropped in a couple of areas in the Grand Prairie area, Weyerhaeuser actually ran and still is running a large control program through the FRIA Mountain Pine Beetle operational grant program. So that's been great for us this year. They've picked up a lot of trees that had been surveyed that were not going to be controlled, so that was excellent to see the forest industry step up and do a large control program. So I just ran the numbers actually yesterday, and so far we're sitting at just over 165,000 trees controlled between the AESRD and the Weyerhaeuser programs. And we have the variety of survey or control methods, so fall and burn, mechanical. And where to next? Provincial objectives. I already said that our provincial objectives need to be expanded. There's also some work going on in the pine strategy and the rehabilitation, but I just want to talk about some of the provincial objectives. We had the original 2 provincial objectives since 2006, and as we get farther along in the mountain pine beetle management program, we really see a need to expand our overall objectives and make the management program more of a management program in terms of the overall forest and not just the mountain pine beetle issue. So number 1 and number 2 objectives would stay the same. But number 3, we want, and this isn't in the formal objectives, these are what we're going to propose for our new objectives in our new strategies. To rehabilitate stands with significant tree mortality, so really bring that to the forefront. A lot of these objectives we're actually working on informally, but we would like to incorporate them in the formal program. Contribute to the goals and objectives as outlined in the land use framework plans or sub-regional plans. And this includes the caribou range plans. Mountain pine beetle level 1 has been, has been considered in the range plans, and using aggressive level 1 or single tree treatments in core habitat for caribou. Protect endangered tree species and critical habitat. We have whitebark and limber pine, which are 2 endangered species in the province, and mountain pine beetle has the ability to attack and kill these. So we have been in the past trying to do some protection with Bourbonon and to keep the areas clean. But as well, we are also working on comb collection and germination methods, and going to start to try and do some outplanting for these species. And because they are endangered species, and a lot of the work has to do with genetic work and mountain pine beetle and an introduced rust species, it does fall under the Forest Health umbrella. So we have been tying the endangered tree species recovery planning and operations stuff to the mountain pine beetle program. Participate and collaborate on interprovincial, territorial, and national spread mitigation issues or initiatives. We are active in this, and through the National Forest Pest Strategy, we want to continue working on this, because any information that we can share and any experiences that we can share to other folks just getting into the mountain pine beetle business is great. As well, there still are a lot of learnings and a lot of good ideas that we can glean from people still like Tim, and also from Rory, and from researchers and the whole forest health body. And number 7, support Alberta-based research to inform management decisions, which is one of the things that we're doing here, is learning about all the research that's going to be coming out so that we can make the scientifically valid operational decisions that we need to in terms of management and also for the rehabilitation strategies. What have we gained? We get a lot of questions on, what are we getting for the money that we're spending? Are we actually saving trees? How much money are we saving? What can we tie for a dollar figure for what mountain pine beetle management? What has our $400 million bought us? And I guess really the only thing, one of the things that I can say is it has bought us green trees. We do have areas that will need to be rehabilitated, but we do have a lot of green trees out on the landscape, and I think a lot of that is due to our aggressive management program. Since 2006, not including this year that we are just going through now, we haven't added those to the graph, we've treated just over 1 million trees since 2006. And using our green to red data, our actual on-the-ground green to red data that we collect every year, we grew those 1 million trees that we controlled through the years to see what those trees would have grown to had we not initiated the control program. And without initiation of the control program, the 1 million trees that we have treated would have grown to 47 million trees. So that's pretty significant. That is about 1 year of conifer AAC in the province. So that's pretty significant savings of trees, I think. And that is only in, obviously, just the trees. That does not have any indication of the ecological value of the remaining green trees that we have out there, and the goods and services, the watersheds, the wildlife habitat, the visual, all of that.